building behind us, and we're having breakfast with all the evangelists and disciples in the morning. And I forget what we were talking about, but my comment to him from what we were talking about, I said, so this, meaning this life right now, so this isn't our destiny. And he looked at me and he said, thank God for that. And it just struck me because, there's a book about his life called Destiny. We believe in destiny. That God has something for us in this life. And if anybody could live with the satisfaction of a destiny fulfilled and faithful, Pastor Mitchell would be the guy. But even with all the glory of what God was doing and was still to do through our pastor's life was still pretty tough business. And he was glad that this wasn't all there is. This isn't all there is. And we come in various levels of woundings and violations and things, and sometimes we're this is destiny. This is my destiny. And no, there's something so glorious that awaits us. Excuse me, if you have your Bibles, the book of Revelation in chapter 21. I just read this text and just talked, and I've got thoughts a little more together this morning, because this, of course, is a conference. But it says, now I saw a new heavens and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, behold, I make all things new. He said to me, write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. And he who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake, which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. I want to talk about overcomers from this text, and God has something for us to do for him in this life. And sometimes because of what we are going through at this moment, we can decide we're going to walk away. You've read the statistics, 42% of pastors have seriously considered leaving the ministry. That's up another 4% from a few months ago. So some of us are here. They didn't even ask me. But to be willing to hang in there and be faithful, to be willing to go again if you've failed, or to go again if even now you're struggling, but there's an opportunity, to be willing to contend again and believe again. You're going to have to know that it's not all about what you're experiencing right now. There is a dignity and a destiny that lies ahead of us. We have a destiny here. Some are familiar, like we think of our leaders and the powerful destinies that they're fulfilling, but there are obscure people in every one of our churches. They'll never be behind a pulpit, right? They'll never testify at conference, perhaps, but they're fulfilling their destiny, serving in the local church, ministering in outreaches, and and helping the kingdom of God move forward. But here, this life is not our ultimate dignity, and it's not our ultimate destiny. I'm just going to say that some of you probably your dignity has taken some hits over the last few years. That not everybody thinks you're the most wonderful thing that walks the earth. That sometimes people can be very cruel in their criticisms. And sometimes they can take the most heartbreaking things of your life and turn them on you and use them as a point to accuse you. Life can be pretty hurtful business. People, Pastor Mitchell used to say, when the people are mad at the gods, they throw rocks at the temple. Well, that's pastor now. To be blamed for the failures of others, right? That their life hasn't worked out, and so now it's on you. You know, Kipling had that poem, if you're do this, you're a man, my son. He talked about if you can hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. And he also talked about to give the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. You know, we couldn't necessarily relate to that when we were 24, but it means something different now. And to think, is this my destiny? Right? Is this what I have given my life for? What I'm experiencing at this moment? You know, our kids, some of us have had kids drug addicted, living on the streets. We didn't even know if they were alive or dead. Some of you are dealing with physical things, brutal physical thing. We heard about Sister Campbell last night. It's reality. We have a dear pastor and a pastor's wife up in the Northwest, both fighting cancer right now. These are wonderful people, some of the finest people in the earth. But they're having to contend with some stuff right now. Is this what I get for... No, God has something so glorious for you. He says, and I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And verse 7 says, I will be his God, and he shall be my son. That goes for daughters too. But there's the corporate thing. I believe there's a corporate experience to this, but then it gets down to your individual relationship with God. Because what heaven is going to mean, what eternity, what the New Jerusalem is going to mean, is that your sonship, the fact that you are one of the family of God, is going to come home with you with such force, such glory, such majesty, that you, for all eternity, are a child of God. Now, we know that that's what we are, but it is not going to come to its full force in our experience to know the fullness of what that means until eternity. There's a glory that is in you that will only ultimately be fulfilled in eternity. An identity that you have right now as a child of God, which is the most glorious thing about your life. The most glorious thing about your life is not the position that you hold. It's not the size of your church. The most significant thing about your life is not the failure of your life. It's not the numbers of people that you've gotten saved. The most glorious thing about your life is you are a child of God. And maybe you don't have the position you once had, right? Maybe your position is not really reinforcing your dignity right now. It's saying the opposite. It's one thing to go through intense things in life, but God's moving. But it's another thing when you're going through intense things in life and nothing's happening. But doesn't change the fact that you are a child of God. And you have to go. You have to go there. You have to live there. If we're going to do this thing, stay faithful, keep contending, not give up, not lose heart, not get bitter attitudes, not go into cynicism. If we're going to keep this thing alive in us, we've got to look beyond this life. You're not going to get all your vindication here. You're not going to get all your reward here. We can sense those, you know what it is like when you sense the presence of God so significantly that nothing else matters. Like whatever you're going through in life, when you sense that presence, like, okay, I'm going to be good. Imagine what that would be like when that is the very air and atmosphere that you breathe continually. You know, like I said, I fell about 24 hours short from being able to get to Prescott Conference, be able to hear my pastor preach, and he starts preaching, and I start coming back to life. Right? God met with us. Right? That visitation of God, there's something waiting for you and I, so glorious. 1 John says, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world doesn't know us is it didn't know him. Dear friends, now are we the children of God, and what we shall be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. It's like the fulfillment of our sonship, like something so far more glorious than we can comprehend. You know, we had a thing as our kids were growing up, and we'd have to go through like a tough time or something that we weren't happy about having to go through. We would say, wave to yourself in the future. Like picture yourself on the other side of the trip from Yuma to Phoenix, right? Like picture yourself on the other side and wave to yourself like you're really going to be there. Sometimes we need to wave to ourselves in the New Jerusalem. Hey, I'm going to be there someday. Let's think about tears in heaven. That's not a Clapton song where I'm thinking about it. There is a tremendous joy in living for God, right? To be saved and sins forgiven. There is the fruit of the Spirit. And there's nothing like hearing glorious reports from the field of people saved, powerful conversions, and you just, the joy, you weep for joy, and those are glorious times. But notice here that the prophet makes a point to say that it's when we get to heaven that our tears are wiped away. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. It sounds like we arrive tear-stained. We arrive tear-stained. Mourning, sorrow. It says crying, and crying is, I like crying. That's a good word. But it really means wailing. Pain. That's when it stops. That doesn't mean we're going to be miserable all the time. No, it just means that life can be so sad. It can be profoundly sad. And what we sometimes do, because we're all told we're supposed to be happy, 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 right? It's my right. It says in the Declaration of Independence, I have a right to be happy. So the problem is that when we encounter sad things, it's like, whose fault? Somebody must be doing something wrong if I'm sad. somebody's not caring for me, somebody's not being nice enough to me. Maybe it's my fault. I'm such a loser, that's why I can't. But, we live in a broken world. It's called a vale of tears, like sometimes there's going to be crying. It doesn't mean that it's always somebody's fault. You don't have to blame people for your tears. Stop it. Okay, we have to recognize we're going to go through stuff like that. And there's comfort, but sometimes the comfort can be kind of fleeting. But there's a promise that remains. And this is what I'm saying. We have to live here. You have to wipe away the tears and go for it. You have to preach that sermon, right? You've got to go on that outreach. You've got to respond to the call, right? We can't let this stuff keep us from fulfilling the will of God. Our destiny in eternity is linked to our being faithful to our destiny here. Romans 8, His Spirit lets us know that together with Christ, we will be given what God has promised. And we also share in the glory of Christ because we have suffered with Him. I am sure that that what we are suffering now cannot compare with the glory that will be revealed in us. Yeah, it hurts really, really bad here sometimes, but just think if that is nothing compared to how glorious. You've got to go there, right? You have to recognize that. That's how you process, right? Pastor Mitchell would say, life is, 5% what happens to you, 95% how you process. Well, this is part of the processing, because I asked him. Okay, you tell me how to process. How do I process? 2 Corinthians 4, for our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Is that your sense? Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that can't be seen. For the things which you see now will soon be gone. But the things we cannot see will last forever. We're talking about the forever destiny. We're talking about the forever joy, right? The forever, the tear stains wiped from the face. That we're talking about the forever, no more pain, mental, emotional, physical, right? That day is coming. It's coming very, very soon. And if you let this life and the pain right now define you and allow your flesh an excuse to cop out, to disobey, to sin, to not be faithful, don't go there. I know it hurts. But there's a comfort coming that is absolutely beyond your grasp. They are heavy, but they're not heavy in comparison. But it is, just as the scriptures say, what God has planned for people who love Him. It's more than eyes have seen or ears have heard. It has never even entered our minds. See, don't throw away what you can't even grasp that you have. There's something beyond your comprehension. I don't know what we're doing for eternity. I know it's probably not singing Amazing Grace for 10,000 years. There's probably other stuff we're going to be doing. But the glory of it is unimaginable. It is an unimaginable, glorious destiny. To think of it, we can speculate, and that's for another sermon another time. It was C.S. Lewis that said, if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we are made for another world. Though the best that this life gets, it still doesn't fully satisfy. We can feel so full at the moment, but you know what? Even the excitement doesn't last until the next crisis phone call, right? But see, in eternity, it never goes away. It's forever. It's forever. I want to close on a thought of overcomers, and this is kind of what I wanted to bring across. Sadly, there are some people who aren't going to make it. We read that in our text, and I'm not here to pass judgment on who that is or is not. But when we read the book of Revelation, the message that we get is eternity is for the overcomers. Eternity is for the overcomer. Eternity with Jesus is for the overcomers. Verse 7, he who overcomes shall inherit all things. You read this 7 letters to the 7 churches, in each one, the promise is to the overcomer. The overcomers will drink of the water of life. The overcomers will receive that white stone that has a name that only you and Jesus himself understands. Overcoming doesn't mean that we win all the time. Overcoming is something you could do even when you lose, because you respond with the right heart. Romans 8 says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. That's one of the most intense Psalms in the whole book of Psalms. And he quotes it, not the Lord is my shepherd, right? He quotes that one in Romans 8. And he said, yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Even when they're killing us, we win. How does that work? That word, more than conquerors, it's actually a word, more than conquerors. It's like hyper, Nikon, and Nikon is the word for who overcomes. So it's like we are more than overcomers in Jesus Christ. Even when we lose, we win. Even when we lose the convert, even when we lose chunks of our church, right? Even when parts of our brain leak out of our ear onto the writing pad, right? We can still win, right? Because there's a strength that is made perfect in weakness. And that when Paul's going through something and he says, I can't do this, right? I can't do this. Unless you take this thing away, Lord, I cannot do this. And God says, no, my grace is sufficient and my strength is made perfect in weakness. And you're hurting, Paul, and we don't know what the thorn is, and I think that's on purpose. But it's something that he felt that he couldn't serve God unless it was removed, and he was wrong. Jesus said, you're wrong. Well, he didn't say it like that, but he said, my strength is made perfect in weakness. I know you will be more effective serving me through the hurt than if I remove all the hurt away. See, we're more than conquerors. Survivors and thrivers. Back in the very early days of Prescott. And if I get information wrong, I was kind of a Johnny-come-lately. I didn't arrive until 1977. But back in the very beginning days, there were a couple of music groups. One was the music group Eden. And this was a rock and roll band, local, that was very famous, at least in Yamhill County. I don't know if it went, no, not Yavapai, that's where I live. Yavapai County. So, I lived in Yuma County, Yavapai County, and Yamhill County. And the question is, why? Anyway, so this is a rock band, playing around, concerts around, and then little areas that they're doing. And another band was really an assembly of teenage girls, and called Living Waters. And so those were the two bands, Eden and then Living Waters. And they would go and do concerts together, and Pastor Mitchell would have Living Waters sing right before the altar call, right? Because the way they sang prepared the way for that. There was an atmosphere of conviction, and that was a reference point really for the larger fellowship, right? We're going to reach some people with music. Think of all the groups that have come since, right? Probably thousands of music groups, really, over the years. Thousands of concerts. All the Eden guys left. Out of Living Waters, 3 of those young girls have passed away now. 2 of them, Pastor Mitchell's daughters. But a bunch of the rest of them left. Out of those 2 groups that had such an impact in the early days, there's only 2 left. Sister Mona Warner and my wife. Overcomers. It's not like they've never been through stuff, but to hang in there and be faithful and keep your heart right with God, or get it right when it gets out of right, and hang in there. See, the deserters don't get to make the final call on our destiny as a fellowship. Your destiny as a church, or your destiny as an individual preacher or pastor's wife. The deserters don't get to make the call. That's because we're overcomers. If we will just stay faithful, if we will just keep doing what Jesus has entrusted us to do. Pastor Mitchell said so many times, this is not a work of man, this is a work of God. Right? We're not the only people saved, we know that. We're not the only people doing something for God. But I am accountable for what God placed me in. Right? I will answer to God for being faithful to this. Deserters don't make the final call. For many years, Pastor Mitchell, after Living Waters ceased to be a band, because just about all of them went out as pastors' wives. But for many years, and I do remember these days, they would Pastor Mitchell would reassemble Living Waters for the Prescott conference. And it was interesting that he would have them sing on Friday night. And he would have them sing a particular song. Through conference, we had been challenged, had our butts kicked, right? We've been corrected, we've been made decisions for God, and now we're headed back. And he wanted this song played for the final night of those conferences. I have a video of that song being played. It's the video is very bad. The hairstyles are worse. But there's just something about the message there that I don't know. Living Waters. I asked one of the members to sing, and she demurred. So we got to watch the video. Thank God. So he ain't through with us yet. He's still doing a work in us. So one of the things that was so moving in those days is those who were pastors' wives many times, they were going through stuff, but they were up there singing. And thank God for those that are still with us after all.